Everything starts from awareness.
Good leadership is simply catalyst.
Focus on the reason and you'll find inspiration in anything.
This impact continues to grow.
Conversation about intentionality.
If you change nothing, nothing will change.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Project Spiral. I'm Tim.
And I'm Abigail, and we have got a fantastic episode for you today. But before we get there, Tim, can you tell us where you are currently?
You see this little yellow behind me?
I do.
That little piece of yellow is in a country called Brazil.
Is there anything special about the little piece of yellow?
No, it just happens to be in Brazil. And I'm in Brazil,
I thought you were going to be like, this is a special thing that all houses in Brazil have on their walls.
Yeah, the special Brazilian wood panel, known for its good luck.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with the location other than the fact that it's currently
Yes, exactly.
Which is probably the most important thing about any location is the fact that it exists.
Yes, it does exist. Actually, no, there is some similarities. This color, for those listening in, it's like a bright yellow. This whole house that I'm in my girlfriend's mom's house in a place called Caldas Novas in the middle of Brazil. And it's beautiful. Yeah, the whole thing is actually painted this nice yellow. And there's a lot of kind of bright colors around. And so it's been fun traveling around. And yeah, here it's known for its hot springs and in a place that's already very hot. But it's been fun. Yeah. Eating a lot. Brazilians like putting something called, I forgot what it's called. Farofa. Yeah, there we go. And they put it on everything. On every single meal, you'll have just breadcrumbs over it. But it's really good breadcrumbs. So sometimes it's like bacon and peas that are kind of put in there. So I've just been eating a lot of that and really good meat. It's beautiful. Where I am, it's interesting because it's like a mix somewhere between like the Midwest and Texas and the African savanna. So that's like the best way that I can describe it, where you just have like rows and rows of cornfields and then like the big, tall kind of East African trees that are like very flat on top. So it's fun. Yeah, it's a very interesting place. My mind is blown where I'm like, I can't put this in any category.
All right, let us follow those Brazilian breadcrumbs all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Scotland to chat with our guests today. I can do transitions too.
You can do transitions too. Well done.
All right. Want to give us a quick intro to Aileen?
Aileen McKay is wonderful, as you're about to hear. So she does a lot of really interesting things. She is a freelance English editor, tutor, creative writer, facilitator, and optimist, and splits her time between Edinburgh and Scotland and Berlin and Germany. And she does a lot of really cool things, one of which is doing activism in relation to the Scottish independence movement, which she'll talk a lot about. She does work in terms of feminist outreach toward men and getting men to be feminists. And she's just published a really good book called The Book Every Man Should Read, but that's in German, but it soon will be in English. And one thing that's really cool about her is that feminism undergirds all of her work. So her work as an editor, her work in terms of her various clients, her work with activism in relation to Scottish independence, kind of her modus operandi is through a feminist lens. And we have a really cool discussion about what it means to be a feminist in liberatory work.
Enjoy the show.
Aileen, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
We were talking just before this. So we met Aileen through Anna Zoe, who is a guest of ours in February. And she was like, you have to talk to Aileen. She's a wonderful human being. And then when we've learned more about you, it's like, holy shit, we have to have her on the show. And then, so great to have you.
Tell me about the painting behind you.
I painted these.
What?
No way. So cool.
Part of a little series I call my Scotia series, because she was the first woman that I guess we know gave Scotland its name. So she migrated from Egypt and her people were matriarchal, so they followed her. And she came on a ship and they went through Europe, up the coast of Spain, then to what is now Ireland, and then eventually to what is now Scotland. And there's obviously debate as to whether it's mythology or strictly factual history, but my own belief is whether it was her or someone like her or someone's like her. This is part of our history, and I think it's really important in an era of rising right-wing nationalism and tighter controls on borders and a very aggressive Home Office in London. I think it's really important that Scots remember that we come from migrants and we come from a woman. So I painted these. There are seas, and this is the horizon line here, and skies. And blue's my favorite color, in case you can't tell.
Oh.
So I just sort of started and went from there, and the story makes sense to me, and it seems to have resonated with some other people, so I'll keep making them.
Oh my God, amazing. Okay, so we were trying to figure out where to start this conversation because you do so many things in so many different like areas, and there's like feminism and there's Scotland and like independence, and anyway, there's so many different aspects. But let's just like, to start us off, let's talk about your day today. So like, what have you been up to so far today? What do you have going on today? And what is like most interesting to you today?
Okay, so it's been a day of a few parts. I actually started my day. So I'm here in Edinburgh. I'm based in Edinburgh at the moment.
I love your city. That's awesome.
Yes, please visit.
Home of the Fringe Festival. Yes.
Yeah, August is like Edinburgh becomes this whole other world. The months of the year is a very different city again, but I have to say I love both. I moved here 2 years ago with my partner, and before that I'd been in Berlin, and before that in Glasgow, and originally I'm from the Highlands of Scotland. So there you are, quick potted history. But anyway, so my day so far, we have sunshine, which I know is rare for Scotland, but we're happy about it. And I started today with one of my in-person clients. I think I use this word in the loosest sense, as a lot of freelancers will, because your clients, of course, you have a professional service that you do with them, but you also become friends too. So client/friend. And we met up for an in-person session in a local cafe. And she actually really inspires me. She moved to Scotland from Greece, and she's a mum and a partner, and she's doing her PhD in the ethics of AI, specifically in the world of financial services. So things like the banking app that's on the phone. Okay, that kind of thing. So everyday things, but with a massive impact. And she's coming at it from the legal side. So I'm learning a lot from her. And the work that we do together is I support her in terms of critical thinking and wording and expression during her research process. So that's where my day started. And then I have to admit, I encountered a particularly good dog on the street. It was a stop pet dog.
That's very important. That's the most important.
So it's a genuine highlight.
Essential, Ethan.
Life force. And then I have this wonderful interview with yourselves, which definitely doesn't happen every day and is an absolute pleasure. And then after this, I will be on a call to a client/friend who is typically based in Poland, but is currently at a conference in Croatia. And she's a professor in the field of teacher education. So I will be supporting her to prepare for a keynote that she's going to be giving tomorrow. And then after that, it's probably time for a walk in the sunshine and some food.
Whoa.
Wow. What a day.
It sounds like a full day. Hopefully this podcast, I don't know if it can rival the dog.
Probably not. Maybe it'll come in second
probably
place.
Not. Probably, yeah. We hope for second.
Yeah.
Even if we're on the podium with the dog, that would be great.
That's all we just want to be near the dog on the podium.
Don't we all?
Please, in its presence. So learning a little bit about what you do. Yeah, again, you do so much. And even today, that's an example of an array from AI to everything else you're doing. So I know that from what we know about you is that feminism is very important to pretty much everything you do and undergirds pretty much all your work. And that's so cool. And I'm just starting from the beginning. When did that start for you? When did feminism start to be kind of the basin in which you do the rest of the work? When did that begin for you?
Wow. I think if I'm honest, I was probably a feminist before I knew the word or the terminology. I think a lot of feminists can relate to that, but I just have sort of maybe not a specific concrete memory, although looking back perhaps, but just at the time, a sort of swirl of memories of just being in my late childhood, early adolescence, and just encountering things like, why is it that we keep studying books by men and only men? Or why is it that when I'm taller than the boys in my class, it's not cool, but when the guys are having a height contest, it's cool among them?
Mm.
Why is it when someone needs help with something physical, I'm never asked, even though I'm strong? And of course, these are, I'm sure I'm going to drop the word privilege into this chat a whole lot because I think it's really important. And of course, these are, as I say, relatively privileged, really sort of minor, innocuous queries to be running up against in your early life. But if I'm looking back, I would say those are the kind of things that were just swirling round. And I'm beginning to wonder, why are things the way they are? I don't like this. Things be different. So I would put my roots in feminism back there. And then going forwards, the more I learned about the world, the more I heard things, read things, encountered new people, encountered new ways of life, and just going through early adulthood, the more I aligned with feminism on purpose and very intentionally. And then now in my early 30s, it's a badge that I'm very proud to wear. And for me, feminism is, I don't know if framework's too strong a word because it underpins my life in very small ways, very day-to-day ways, but also larger political ways in terms of the ideologies that I'm willing to hold and those that I choose to reject. So it runs through all parts of my life, but I find it to be a source of guidance. And a kind of, again, I don't want to use too heavy terms like a moral metric or something like that, because I don't think it necessarily is. But it is maybe the lens through which I see the world and try to do better for myself and for others. Maybe that's how I can do it.
Mm.
Timmy, can I ask you the same question? When did you start considering yourself a feminist?
It's interesting. As we were playing for this, I was thinking about that. I mean, part of it was, I think our mom was just always just had a history of kind of beating you back against gender expectations, particularly from her dad. And she went into politics, and when her dad was saying like, no, women should not be in politics, and then she did, and too bad for him. So I just kind of grew up with the atmosphere of just like, why should there be those barriers? But the first distinct moment I remember we learned feminist theory in international relations, where it said how dictatorships are modeled out of like abusive male households, where it's like the man's like, I will protect you, but you have to do everything I say, and if not, I'll punish you or beat you. But just saying like that, like if you look at Pinochet's government in Chile or in many of the Latin American dictatorships and in dictatorships around the world, and not just dictatorships, now you're seeing it in crumbling democracies like the US. When I saw that, I was just like, oh, it all makes sense. And we should all be paying attention to these strategies. It goes way beyond just like in our individual interactions. Sorry, that just came to mind. I was like, I forgot about that.
That's really cool.
But Aileen, so when you said you not only were working on Scottish independence, but were doing it through a feminist lens, I was like, wow, that is so cool. I never linked those two together. So like, what can you talk more about that, of just like how, just your activism and how you approach that through a feminist lens? Probably very easy, not broad question at all.
No, it's a very important question, actually. I think I can explore it maybe from two main sides, but let's see. I'm sure this will go up. One, I guess, comes from the activism side. So I think something that really set apart the civic debate and dialogues and activism and culture shift around Scottish independence compared to things like general elections or the Brexit referendum or other political watershed moments that have happened since then, was that with the Scottish independence debate, you had people from so many more diverse political backgrounds coming into coalition on one constitutional issue. And because it was this opportunity to say not only, okay, which guy in a suit do you want to represent you for the next 4 years, and actually, how would you like the future of our shared community to look? And what safeguards, mechanisms, systems do you want to see put in place or maintained or razed to the ground in order to serve that vision? That sort of, I'll say, radical questioning in the Angela Davis sense of radical meaning going to the root. And because it was such a radical questioning, the discussion was much more open than other political dialogues typically are, in my experience, which is why I think myself and many other Scots do credit the moment or the question of Scottish independence as their own political awakening, because where they might not have felt so welcome in capital P political dialogues previously, they were now being welcomed in with open arms. So from that sense, and also I did some activism at the time with Women for Independence, who did have a specific drive to make sure that women were involved in the debate, not only represented on podiums and stages and panels, but also on the doorstep and on the high street. And that was an incredibly rewarding experience. We then went on to have the privilege of a female First Minister who wasn't trying to fit into the shoes of her male predecessors, like someone like Margaret Thatcher did or Theresa May did in the UK government. We had Nicola Sturgeon until fairly recently, and she was someone who was very critical in her thinking and very invested in these issues of equity, which do align with the vision for independence for, I think, many pro-independence people. So I guess in a very roundabout way, I'm aligning the openness and the equity that's at the heart of feminist endeavours with the same in a vision for Scottish independence. Both in terms of how the debate was conducted and in terms of representatives that did come to the fore as a result of that movement. But on the other side, I'm just going to be really critical and actually call out the UK as a system that I do not subscribe to. It's a system that I see as not only kind of benignly or failing to be feminist, but very actively anti-feminist in terms of its refusal to implement safer borders, for example, for migrants who are arriving to our island for infinite reasons that are their own. And we have a long and brutal history and present as an imperial force in the world as the UK. And I cannot, as a feminist, subscribe to that. For me, the two are completely incompatible. So as a result, for me, the questions of independence and feminism are really intimately interlinked, because if you want to live in a society that welcomes people in, that says, look, it doesn't matter where you're from, please feel welcome. You have a place here. If you can pay your own way, fine. If you need help having your way paid for you, fine. You're welcome regardless. That's the world I want to be part of. And then I'm looking around at which political system has a better chance of making that closer to a reality in my lifetime. And it's not the UK.
It's so interesting that you say that, just about like belonging and everyone being welcome and stuff, because I feel like that's so much of what we're talking about right now in the US with all the ICE raids and just like the absolutely inhumane treatment of immigrants in this country. And it's just that, like, the total opposite of what you're saying about how an ideal society or like a humane. I mean, I'm even like, I'm lowering my expectations from like ideal, just like the bare basic, not bare basic. What's the word?
Bare
minimum. Thank you. The bare minimum. Basic. The bare basic. You know what? There's a place down the street from me called Bar Basic, and I think that's what was in my mind. Anyway, the bare minimum, the bar basic here, whatever. You understand what I'm saying. I was just going to ask, like, just from like a practical standpoint, if you're there and you're like, okay, like I refuse to subscribe to the UK's system of like anti-feminism, and you want to like support the movement and the like ideals that you believe in, like what does that mean on the day-to-day basis? You're not out there like being violent in a way that like is kind of a classic like revolutionary sense. So what does that mean for you on a practical level?
Yeah. So as we're talking, we are just over a decade. We're 11 years on from the last independence referendum. And something that I find incredibly grounding, because actually I'll be completely transparent. My heart is still in pieces about the fact that we democratically voted away our potential for a brighter, equitable future at the ballot. Like, we had a peaceful opportunity to say yes to something, and as a nation we chose to say no. I'm still not over it. And these things take time, and I think it's an important conversation to have, especially with yourselves in the US. When politics go wrong, let's say, it can be really, really painful. But that's not a reason to stop. That's a reason to look after yourself and also to be realistic. Like, if you are someone who is out doing a ton of activism and you have more skin in the game than others, and again, that comes down to a question of privilege, then you have every right to step back. But if you are someone who up until a certain point has felt or has had the luck of having less skin in the game, then that's your time to step up, right? You have the capacity, the emotional labor, wavelength left to do that.
Yeah.
And it's your time to shine, step up and follow in the footsteps of people who have had the courage and bravery to go ahead of you. In the Scottish context, I think maybe I just want to remind myself out loud that there is this historical sweep that we should remember we're part of. So the UK is actually very new. It came into being late 1600s, early 1700s through an undemocratic process. No one was consulted. And the crowns of Scotland and England were united by those royal families. And then there was a political union that followed. So this was only 330, let's say, years ago. So the union's actually very new, and remembering that gives me a lot of comfort in terms of thinking, well, actually, there is a bigger picture here. And the things that I would like to change in my lifetime, I have to hope will. But I can also rest assured that any effort is part of a culture shift rather than something that I'm perhaps going to see overnight. That said, I do really miss sort of tangible moments of being like, we're on the street now, we're registering voters now, those 10 people will now have a ballot that did not before. And that tangibility is something that I really miss and I think is definitely hard to maintain as time goes on. So now I think it's more about pivoting and thinking, well, how do I work these ideas into conversations or attitudes or future votes, and maintaining that lens when it comes to other political questions? Abbie, to answer your question, I think I'm waffling. Just pivot is maybe the word that comes to mind, is just thinking, well, you have to have a sustainable approach. We are in sort of fighting the good fight for the long haul, I hope. And to do that, we're going to need to be able to keep going and keep going and keep going. And that requires being able to dip in, dip out, to take new approaches, to adjust. And there's not really a perfect way of doing that.
It's like a relay race.
Wait, how a relay race? Oh,
Well,
you can take the baton and you keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't originate that metaphor. I've heard it before. But anyway, sorry, Timmy, go for it. I keep interrupting.
I find that so interesting. And I'm so glad before you brought up Angela Davis. And I brought this up in previous episodes of this podcast, but I saw Angela Davis speak once in person, which was so cool at BAM in Brooklyn. And just this older lady that strolls on the stage, sits down and just like commands this opera house that she was talking to. And she was incredible. But one thing that she said that shocked me was that to be an activist is to say change might not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow. It probably won't happen in my lifetime. In 1,000 years, maybe. And you still continue the work. And I was shocked when Angela Davis said this. I'm like, you said this? As like one of the most radical thinkers I know, but it's just saying like taking a longer approach. Maybe that helps breed a sense of optimism if your purview is much larger than just saying like, hey, you're seeing like one little blip in history, and that's your entire reference. Like, no, what happens if your time frame expands? What happens if you take those smaller cultural shifts as building towards something greater? And yeah, as you're saying that, like I'm thinking about in the U.S. right now, where the trend seems to be so backwards in terms of immigration, in terms of queer rights, just in so many ways. But yeah, as you're saying, it's just saying like, hey, you can be disappointed in this moment and fight in this moment, but have a larger lens, and maybe that will allow you to continue the work even longer. So yeah, that just made me think different.
Then on the notion of feminist histories, because I think that's the space where we can look to the past and take stock in order to recalibrate and reorient for the future, and to keep doing that in the sustainable way that we're talking about. And I think when we put our feminism lens on to history, we understand that progress is not linear. And you mentioned queer rights, and as a queer woman, they're completely at my heart. And if I think of the Scottish context, there is a trajectory that gives me a lot of hope. So at the moment in the UK, we are seeing a lot of aggression towards the trans community, which is, of course, completely unacceptable. And it's coming from the political level, the media level, the legal levels, every level you can imagine. And although this is as a non-trans person, I'm not necessarily in a position to understand the lived experience of someone who is trans. So I'm not sure how much comfort this is for them. However, I do think what we're seeing now, to look at this idea of non-linearity, is a backlash against what has been a trajectory of progression. The backlash must be fought, but if we are able to have the capacity or the luxury of having this more zoomed out perspective, then we can understand that the onward trajectory is still one of progress. And that is, I don't mean that in a sort of a blithe kind of ignorant way. I mean that is a non-negotiable. That is happening. That is fact. And these individual setbacks, I have to hope in time will pale into insignificance in terms of the direction that we are actually going collectively. And to look round in a non-linear way to history, if we look at Scottish history, before Christianity arrived in the British Isles, the landmass that is now Scotland was Celtic. And in Celtic faiths and cultures and languages and ways of being, gender and sexuality and the ways that we organize ourselves in relationships and family units were far less binary and rigid than they are just now in the 21st century. So although we might be thinking we've made all this progress, and in several very important, very tangible ways we have, I will say that, for example, the legalisation of same-sex marriage in Scotland has been revolutionary and should have happened long ago, can be a little bit more conceptual, I'm putting air quotes around that, then there is a history that we have roots in that we can look to for inspiration. I'm not saying we have to go back to the good old days. I also think that rhetoric's very unhelpful and misleading at best.
Yeah, sounds like Make America Great Again. Yeah, that
for sure. Like,
yeah.
When was it great? Discuss, be critical, right?
Yeah.
And great for whom, more importantly, and at what cost. But I think by this, I just mean we can look to what's already been done, what's already been fact, what's already existed successfully, harmoniously, colourfully, problematically, beautifully, and understand that therefore we must have the capacity to do that again, or a new version of it again.
I love that so much. And it just like makes me think about how it's all about perspective and about being critical about what you've been told. And especially because I feel like there's a tendency to view these structures and these systems as being forces of nature and a fact of life when they're not. Like you were saying, the UK is not that old in the grand scheme of things. The US is even younger. These systems are new and they're man-made and they can be dismantled much more easily than we think. And it's this whole idea that we're told, like, this is just the way things are and this is the way it has to be. And it's going to be really hard to get rid of it. And like, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about the just the whole abortion debate and how recent a debate that is. And it was like manufactured in the 70s as a way to like rile up the right, to get them mad, and to get people like to the polls and to the ballots. But they didn't, like, that wasn't really like an important point for them before, but they were like the far right or the conservatives were just like, we're deciding that abortion is going to be a thing that we're going to take a stand on. And then everyone got really upset. And then abortion rights went under attack and like everything just exploded from there. And people view, like, people who are pro-life view that as like, this is like the most important thing. This goes back generations to what I've always felt, when I've always believed. And it's like, actually, no, this was an opinion created for you 50 years ago. It's not that old. Like, it wasn't even your idea. Like, it was manufactured in order to make you have the exact reaction you're having. And so I think, like, and I don't think that's just for the right. I think that's, I think we can all be manipulated in different ways if we're not careful. But like, I don't know, I was just thinking in terms of feminism. I had this like realization moment last year because I got really into reading about Byzantine history, which I didn't really know very much about. And I'm not going to say that like the Byzantines were like super, okay, wow, rude. It's not like they were like super feminist matriarchal society or anything like that, but there were several like empresses and queens who, like, in that time period in Europe, were extremely powerful and extremely well respected. And it wasn't in a way that was like, wow, okay, like, she's a woman, but we'll respect her. It was like, yeah, she's a leader and she's like, very important, and we'll respect her because she's a leader, and sometimes like very scary. But I think that blew my mind, because in my view of history, the way I've been taught history was like, first of all, men were the most important. The stuff that men did were like the most important things. And then the second kind of wave of my history instruction was like, okay, yes, men did do all of the important things, but let's the women, like we can't forget the women, like what they did in the home was really, really important too. So let's like, it's so condescending. I hate it. And then this like third wave that I feel like I'm entering now is like, no, actually women like did a lot of like really important, practically important things. And we just like have stopped talking about it. And it really does like reframe the way that I think about history and the arc of history and how these systems that we believe in now are not impossible to dismantle because they are so young and they're so manufactured. Anyway, that's my whole rant. Okay, I do have a question though. I mean, I know
Byzantine history break.
Byzantine, little brief. Okay, if we want to talk about Empress Theodora, I am here for it. We'll do a whole podcast about her. She was so interesting. She was not a good person, but she was fascinating. Anyway, we'll come back to her. That's not the topic of this week's discussion. So for you, I know you do a lot of very intentional work about optimism. And on this show so far this year, we've talked a lot about hope, optimism, what's the difference between them, how intentional you have to be about that kind of practice. So just you personally, how do you find hope or like optimism in your own life?
I do describe myself as an optimist. And I think often it's out of stubbornness because it's maybe my preferred way of seeing the world. I like to be hopeful, I like to be optimistic, and I like to be happy. So in pursuit of those things, it's something I'm fairly resolute about. But it's not easy when you see that so many things are going wrong and there are lots of things in the world that do need to be tackled. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. It can grind you down. But I'm thinking actually of what Anna Zoe said in her episode. She described hope.
Yes.
Yeah, she described it in such a beautiful way through her research. And she'd found that people who had been through the most indescribably difficult situations didn't see hope as optional. They saw it as just a prerequisite to survival, and then they survived. And that really resonated with me. And I think I've been reflecting on that a little bit since I listened to Anna Zoe's wisdom on that. And yeah, I do count myself as living a relatively privileged life. And so I can only speak for myself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I do, maybe enjoy is the right word. I enjoy being optimistic because the critical part of my brain can see all of the problems that are there. But if I choose to feel optimistic, then I have a chance of surviving them, navigating them, challenging them, countering them.
Yeah. I've heard the phrase radical joy before, and I especially from and I can't quote any individual, but from Black feminists in particular. And yeah, it's I think it's so important to maintain that you can like. I think rage is essential. Sadness. I was thinking about what you were saying about are we meant to be sad? We just had a relative that passed away, and I've been thinking about the concept of sadness, where sometimes it can be healthy to feel that and just as much a part of life, and the joy in the middle of that all. It's like they're all essential. And like sometimes in my work, so I do a lot of theater work on different social justice topics, from policing to immigration to all sorts of things, ethics. And sometimes I also do a lot of improv, a lot of comedy. And sometimes I'm just like, is the comedy a distraction from the important work? And I'm like, no, it's just as important. It's a reason for me to get up in the morning and to use my art to make people laugh. And we can talk about the serious things. And they're all needed in terms of living a full life, and a life where you're able to show up when you're needed, to talk about the hard things and to make the change that you want. So yeah, I appreciate that perspective. Yeah, and yeah, when Anna Zoe talked about that with hope, is that just being a need, and the opposite is hopelessness, where you just don't do anything while I get out of bed in the morning. Yeah, that's also been really impactful for me too.
It also, to me, it makes me think of like what we were talking about a couple weeks ago about like saying nay to the naysayers, kind of like,
oh yeah,
where, this idea that people are critical of people who are very hopeful or optimistic because they're viewed as being naive. And that's where I think the nuance does come in, because yeah, like it's important to choose joy and choose happiness, especially in the face of all that's trying to squash you. But also, like, you can be hopeful and be sad. You can like grieve and be hopeful. You can be angry and be hopeful. And often like they fuel each other. Like if you're upset about like how something is and fully aware of the problems, your anger can fuel you towards being hopeful that you can make a change and you need to make a change. It's essential. And so I think it's like, that's kind of what I think is like really important to view hope and optimism as practical things that exist in the real world and aren't just like someone being like, yeah, like I think things are good and they will keep being good. It's like, no, you believe that things can be good and that like most people are good and that like these systems of power can be dismantled. And I don't know, I think that's really important to recognize. And I like love how you put it. And I also love the idea of like, you know, liking being happy, because I think like most people do like being happy, but they don't really let themselves feel it because they're like, okay, well, if I'm a person who's educated, who's aware of the world and all the horrors, how could I possibly be happy? You know? But it's like, no, you can be aware and also choose to be happy just for your own survival, you know, otherwise what's the point? So I don't know. I love hearing that because it honestly helps me feel like I can give myself permission to feel that way too. So I really like that.
Absolutely. And I think like you've both really eloquently put, and I want to just say I'm sorry for your loss as well. And I think the way you described it, Tim, it's like there is this space for us to feel all of the feelings. And they're, you know, short of oversimplifying or romanticizing things, every feeling is valid. And it's about what you do with it that counts. So if your rage motivates you, brilliant. If your happiness keeps you safe, brilliant. If your sadness stops you and makes you realize what you care about, that's also incredibly valuable. And it also just is. Like, humans feel a lot. We're quite complicated little creatures. So we have all of these feelings, absolutely. And trying to deny that, I think, is so missing the point and really limits our experience of the world around us. And I think a question that came up a lot from the Scottish independence context, but we can hardly patent it, was just who benefits from your fear. So if you are stagnated in this place of
Wow.
uncomfortableness and unwillingness or inability to act, who is either quite literally or more metaphorically, let's say, profiting from that?
Yeah.
And is it you? Is it your community? Is it your loved ones? Is it people that you hope can have a better life? If it's not those guys, you might want to think again. Like, who benefits from you being at home, scared, sad, dependent on quick dopamine bursts through shopping, you know, things like that. If that's where the world's going to narrow your experience down to, then we need to rethink what we're doing as a community. I did want to share one thing that's been bringing me a lot of joy lately.
Oh, yes.
Please.
I'm very slowly and chaotically finding my green thumb.
Ooh.
What I'm showing you, she's mint. And for anyone who's not on the video, she is, I would say, about a foot tall, nestling in a repurposed yogurt carton. Hello. Is a single sprig, like the small ones that you get in supermarkets. And I put it in a glass of water, watched the roots grow on my windowsill over here in the sunshine that we have been getting. And then I potted it up into some soil, and I have actually 5 over here. The tallest one is honestly about 1.5 feet tall right now. The reason I mention it is because it is such a simple thing to do in terms of just pursuing joy and watching another living being come into being.
Yeah.
And also, I'm going to go ahead and say it's like lightly anti-capitalism. If you know how to take a small thing from something that you've bought, and then you have the skills, the patience to be able to let that become something bigger, that is a route towards, I don't know, a new skill or contentment that you didn't pay for, or something that just feels like it matters in a time where we're getting hyper-targeted ads that are telling us that actually it's not just buying anything that will solve your issues, it's buying this top-of-the-range, organic, personally tailored whatever that's going to solve everything. But actually, there are really simple things that we can do to interact with the world around us and find happiness and growth in ways that serve us and that quite literally don't cost the earth.
I am like so glad you mentioned that, because I've also been finding similar joy in plants, which I've like never had any success in growing before. So it's a real like victory for me. But I don't know, like my fiance right now, he's in Charlotte, and we got this like, what are they called? Those like aqua plant grower things where it's like the plants grow in water. And like a few months ago, we planted a bunch of seeds just as like growing it inside. And like, it's like the different types of plants are growing at different speeds, but like, oh my God, the lettuce has like gone crazy. And it's like, and for like every day he sends me pictures of the lettuce and he's like, look, it's like peaked up and like we got to harvest some today. And like the amount of joy I find when those like pictures that like, it's, I don't know, it's something that I feel like is like very, I don't want to say like primitive, but very like maybe like intrinsic to being humans of like taking joy and like watching things grow. I feel like it's something that thousands of generations of humans have experienced. And I don't know, I think that's really beautiful. And it does relate to what we were talking about with Sam Bliss on the episode about food, not cops, when he talks about non-market food economies, right? And like non-market food sources and just like how that can
Good
be a little
memory.
piece.
Wow.
I mean, I edited it, listened to it 40 times. But like the idea of how like that can be taking like a little stance against capitalism and against fascism is like, you know, growing things yourself and for your community and taking care of each other. So yeah.
On that, I recently started attending a community garden here in Edinburgh because at the moment the space available to me amounts to my lovely windowsill, but it's still just a window. And I wanted the proper hands in mud. I really agree with you. It's kind of primal or primitive. It's messy getting in about it. One of the things that is so utterly lovely about going along to my local community garden is that the people there, I think the youngest will be the children of other members or students at the local university. And the oldest, I think, are my friends who are in their mid-late 80s going on 90s. And we all just turn up for an hour or two once a week and get our hands dirty. And for some people, it's more about the social. For some people, it's more about the gardening. Some people like to go off in a corner by themselves and just get hyper fixated on one task. Some like to plod through a couple of different ones, just talking about life and everything in between as we go. But I think this opportunity for community that's based on something that's not paid, it's not for money. It doesn't matter if it's sunny or rainy or if you've had a terrible week or you're actually on top of your game and having a great time. None of these things matter because your job is to weed or to plant or to make a hole for something to go in or to listen to your friend or whatever. And that has brought me so much joy. Just, I don't know, it's so simple, but I could wax lyrical about it all day long.
It's such a great analogy to what we've been talking about with this whole conversation of like what's in your hands, what can you do now, and and just taking just a little break from the systems that seem to be all encompassing and all in our face right now. It's like, actually, here's my mint plant and here's a little piece of resistance. So I think that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I know we're going to have to wrap up soon. Before we do is just really want to ask quickly, because I know your feminist work also expands to reaching out to men. And some of your work with Anna Zoe's brother Vincent is so cool. So I just think we could do a whole podcast about that. But I would love if you shared just a little bit about how you got into that. And I know you guys just published a book. Yeah, I'm just wondering how that outreach has gone, because that's such a cool concept for me.
Absolutely. So I have a book here actually, and this manuscript, again, for anyone who's not on video, it's in German. So we have a German language publisher at the moment. And the book is called The Book That Every Man Should Read. And we wrote this book collectively in English. So English is our shared working language, and we are on the hunt for an English language publisher. And we co-wrote the book with Vincent and Amy and myself and a few other colleagues as a group called the Feminist Lab. And we met in Berlin. And originally, actually, we didn't have the plan to write a book. So we met with the intention to talk over the topic or the relationship of men and feminism. And actually, I would love to just transparently tell you the story of our first conversation as a group. And initially a slightly larger group. And then when the book came to being, we became a smaller group. So we actually split the group in terms of gender. The women went for a chat and the guys went for a chat as well. And we were just chewing over this topic of just, how did we come to feminism? What does feminism mean to us? Whatever. And the guys came back And they had this beautifully crafted technical definition of what feminism is. You know, the legal and social equity of everyone of any sex in a society in terms of economy, law, da 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 da. Sure, true and important. And I was obviously in the group of women talking over this question, this prompt. And we all just kind of landed in a feeling of, oh my gosh, it's the bare minimum. Is what we were saying earlier. It's just the minimum of everyone having the rights they need, the resources they need, the material conditions they need for a good life, regardless of gender, sexuality, economic background, race, skin color, all of these things. So when we met back up, this was quite an interesting sort of meeting of approaches, the sort of technical, the considered, the perhaps initially more detached perspective, and the one that came from us of just like frustration and hands up, you know, kind of being a bit over it and from that place we realized that as a group we had a lot that we wanted to explore, not from a position of having learned all there is to learn, not because I think no one ever does at all by any means, including ourselves, but from a position of being on a learning journey and wanting to invite others along with us on that learning journey, specifically cis men, because cis men, especially white cis men, are unduly privileged in the patriarchy that we currently call home, cozy.
Mhm.
In our book project, we co-authored what we hoped would be something of like a personal action strategy that would help men specifically, but anyone really who wanted to find a route into feminism or a way to live out more feminist or equality visions and values. And I'm flicking through the book now to try and find our sweet diagram because it sums things up quite nicely. So it's a circle with 4 parts and the arrows just keep going around. Sorry, it should be this way. Yeah. Okay. And we start up here, top right, with just listening. So listening is always the first step. And this applies to feminism, it applies to other struggles as well, because people are already fighting the good fight. If you are new to a fight, just know that it's been going on for a very long time and you should stop and take stock of what's already happening and don't just insert yourself in as some sort of hero. So listening is our first underpinning idea. And then the next step is about very actively listening. So researching, studying, learning, but equally being mindful during that process. So not just treating people who know more than you, either from lived experience or their own efforts to educate you, but listening to people who are already talking or paying someone for their education later. And then, or slash simultaneously, we have the phase of reflection. So that's that meshing of what you're now taking in with where you are and being honest about that and taking on responsibility for your own reactions to what you're encountering as well. And then lastly, we have the step that I think most of us who are keen to do good or make things better, that's action there.
I like how the diagram for that is literally a fist in the air. So ear, book, speech bubble, thinking bubble, and then fist. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. And or just to suggest we view it as a continuous cycle or a sort of simultaneous process, however you want to conceptualize that. I think you also wanted to know a little bit about how it's been received, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I have to say, I think it's been received very positively. We have had responses from individuals and groups of men who have said that they found the book thought-provoking in a supportive way, which is something that I'm really, really happy to hear because I'm speaking for myself, but certainly anyone in the kind of learning position, let's say, it is quite easy to maybe feel defensive or to have some sort of negative reaction when you're encountered with new information or information that you thought you had a handle on and then realize you don't actually. So to hear that's been very validating and makes me feel like the project's been very worthwhile. And I think it's a book that is as useful to the person as or the reader as they want it to be. So it's the kind of thing that you could dip in and dip out of. Maybe you read the introduction and that's plenty, or maybe you zoom through just to the sort of personal anecdotes that we've included as individuals, or maybe you just like the action cycle that I just described and you want to just go ahead and apply that. So although the book is quite substantial, as you can see, it can be really used however the reader would like. And it's been an absolute privilege to see that go out into the world and to resonate with folk. And I hope that will continue for a long time.
I love the flexibility of it and I hope you guys publish it in English. I totally want to read that. I could try to piece my way through the German and understand none of it. But the there are some there are some words in German that are kind of similar to English.
It's just the way you said it. It's like, yeah, I could really try and sit down and like piece together and like understand none of it at all, but I would try.
No, there's some German words that have English.
I believe, I believe that you could 100% read a language that you don't speak. Yeah. No, you could.
That'll work really well.
Confidence, optimism, hope.
Optimism, mere blips in history. I'm looking forward to whenever that comes out in English. I think that's, first of all, so much credit for you for outreaching to men, and because the more that I've learned about feminism, and not just in outreach about feminism, but also just even in terms of racial liberation and queer activism, that when people with the privilege that come from the traditionally oppressive class, when they become radicalized, going to the root, as you were talking about, it makes their lives better. It makes our lives better. As me, as like a white man, if I'm able to understand my privilege and work to better that, the more that I've been able to understand that, the more that like I like myself, and the more that I feel like I'm a good person moving through the world because of my awareness of saying, hey, I can act in an anti-racist way. I can act in a feminist way. Yeah. And that makes my life better too. And so, I think that's such a cool thing that you're doing. And I want to explore more about that.
Oh my God. This was incredible. I really do feel like we could keep talking for a long time.
Yes.
So you'll have to come back and keep chatting. If people want to follow along with the work that you're doing, are you on social media? Where should people go?
I'll be honest, I'm currently very analog and enjoying it.
Good for you.
That's good.
But I'm
jealous, honestly.
Be in touch with people. So is it too keen if I just give out my email address, or is that?
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Okay. So my name's Aileen. So my email address is Ms. Aileen McKay, my name. So that's MSAILEENKAY@gmail.com. And if anything that we've been talking about has resonated with you, or you would like to be in touch, please do. I always welcome communications. And if I ever do get the old Insta back up and running, I'll be sure to let you know. And a personal
stay off it. Don't come back on it.
It's a horrible world.
Stay off. You got free. Stay free. Thank you everyone so much for listening to this episode of Project Spiral. We would love to hear from you. We'd love for you to get involved. The best way to do that is to follow us on Instagram. We are at Project Spiral. So go check us out, follow along, send us a DM, or you can email us at projectspiral@gmail.com.
We are also on TikTok. We are also on LinkedIn. And we would love it if you can do nothing else at the end of this episode, please leave us a review. That is the best way for us to get the word out about this podcast. If you're in New York, please join us for our monthly Lyceum meetings, where we basically do teach-ins at each other's apartments and cultivate a practice of hope in many different fields and areas. And watch out for our upcoming Generation event that will be happening later this summer. We'll post more information about that soon.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing all these cool ideas. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Aileen.
Thank you for having me. I've really loved it. And actually, unironically, I'm leaving feeling very hopeful. It's always nice to share.
Yes, me too. Yes.
Yes,
Thank you
good.
So Thank you.
Mission accomplished.
This has been a production of Little Scorpion Studios.